Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I'm Roberta and today we are building a traditional family farm featuring a beautiful Victorian inspired farmhouse. I love this style of home and I haven't done one in a while. The last one I did was well over a year ago, so this house ended up being so much fun to work on. The last few builds I made for this channel were a bit more limited as well. They were starter homes, so I was trying to stay in that 20 to 22,000 simoleon mark. So for this one, before I even had an idea of what I was going to build, I knew one thing for sure, and that was I was not going to restrict myself at all as far as packs go or simoleons. I wanted to get back to being able to build more freely, and it will show here in a minute because there is a lot going on in this build, which is exactly why I chose to build here on the red Roan field lot. It's in the Riders Glen neighborhood of Chestnut Ridge, and by now I'm sure you know this lot very, very well. It's the 64 by 64 size lot, and it's the one that's been perfect for all of our huge farms and our ranches. There is another large size lot in the Galloping Gulch neighborhood. It's only slightly smaller. It's still a good size for something like this. I think I just wanted this atmosphere of this neighborhood here. I am going to have to think of something to put up there. I think I'm going to do something a little bit more like rustic up there, but I thought down here was the perfect spot for our beautiful Victorian house. Now, when I initially got the idea to do this style of farmhouse, what immediately came to mind were those really grand front porches with the ornate posts and of course the iconic turrets with all the windows. So I headed for Pinterest to see what I could find, and right there, like 3 houses in, was this beautiful navy blue Victorian. So here I am emulating the shape of that house. And it came together a lot easier than I thought it might, though I did have to beef it up just a tiny little bit because I wanted a little bit more space in the interior to fit all the different rooms I wanted on the main level. And I was having trouble getting all the rooms to fit once I placed the stairs, so I did extend it a little bit on the back side, but otherwise this looks pretty close to the Pinterest house. The posts and railings I used are from the Strangerville pack, and the medium blue, almost blue-green siding you'll see me use is base game. I do a little test run of a darker blue, closer to the color blue that was in the house in the Pinterest photo, but it just felt like it was a little bit too much. So I did settle for this shade and just added the darker cedar shake accent walls, which I ended up loving. It highlighted the more ornate features of this house and really made those white windows pop. The windows I used are a mix of base game windows and the ones we got in the Growing Together pack. I thought those went together pretty nicely. Some of the more plain looking windows that I place on the right side of this house, I do end up changing. I can't remember if I did that on camera or if I end up editing that part out. I did do a lot of editing in this build because I was very determined to keep this under an hour long. I didn't want you guys to lose interest because I think it's the landscaping that takes me forever. Once I get inside and start building, I feel like things come along super, super fast. But that landscaping, I would just hours and hours would go by and I would just be like moving little bushes around and playing around with it. So once I get started with that, I do show, the overall idea of how I was going with things, but then I do end up editing chunks of it out. But you'll see, I don't leave any of the important stuff out, except of course when I get upstairs to do the floor plan. Now, the floor plan and the downstairs came together really easily, but once I got upstairs, it was a whole different story. Pun completely intended, by the way. No, but really, it was just that where the landing comes up, it felt a little bit tight, but I didn't want to bump that wall out and then mess with the shape of the turret. So I ended up reversing the direction of the stairs, which worked out a little nicer. But then I had to completely change up the layout that I had originally mapped out for up there. But in the end, I think it turned out way better than the original plan, and I'm super happy with it overall. I go through and just place doors and archways where I know I want them to go during the floor planning process. So here I am just going back through and changing them to the ones that will go with the decor that I have in mind for this interior. As far as the floor plan goes, downstairs we ended up with a pretty large entryway with the staircase there. Then off to the left side of the stairs we have a small laundry room and half bath. And then we wrap around to the side of the house to a decent sized kitchen. And then continuing on around to the back side of the house is a dining room, and then further over to the right is a living room which connects us all the way back to this entryway. And upstairs there are 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. I do make one of the bedrooms into a home office, but you could easily just use it as a bedroom. And if you want a 4th bedroom even, and you don't mind losing the laundry space downstairs, you could always make that area into a bedroom as well, which would actually work rather nicely because it would have its own ensuite bathroom. It would be a little bit on the smaller side for a bedroom. For a laundry room, it ends up being a rather decent size, but on a lot this big with all these animals and things going on, doing laundry can get a little overwhelming anyway, so changing it might not be the worst idea. I personally like the struggle, so I like to have laundry rooms in most of my builds, but I totally get it if it's not your thing. I also play with the bust the dust feature, but very frequently forget to place vacuum cleaners in my builds, and I don't even realize it until the floors get dirty, and then I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally a thing. The last 3 builds I made did not have vacuums, and now that I'm thinking about it, this one doesn't either. In my defense, there is a lot going on in this one, so it's super easy to forget stuff. At least that's what I'm telling myself anyway. Speaking of things going on, now we are starting the gazebo gardening area of this lot. I imagine the owners of this house are an established husband and wife, and the husband does more of the handyman stuff and he tends to the animals, and the wife enjoys going to flea markets for antiques and gardening and making floral arrangements and knitting and things like that. So I thought I would make her own little space on the property where she can hide away and relax and grow some flowers. During my initial inspiration period of planning out this build, I became set on the idea of building the farmhouse and then quickly decided that I needed to make a gazebo to match. And what goes with gazebos better than some swans in a lake? And then so everything just snowballed from that point. And that's when I sort of came up with the idea that this would be the wife's little hideaway. And I really like how it turned out. I was trying to make it seem like it was one continuous pond. Right now, it doesn't look like it per se, but once I start adding all the like foliage around and section that area out, it does look like one continuous little pond. But I go back and do landscaping in just a bit. I get the overall shape of the gazebo, and then I move on to this portion back here, which is our barn. As I was coming up with the shape of this building, I was keeping in mind that I wanted to section off some specific space for the husband in the household since the wife has her own space. So that's what this little jut out on the side is for. It's also there because it looks more natural and realistic in that way, because that would be where you might store your farming equipment or store your hay. But in this case, we are just going to fill it with some clutter and some fun skill building activities. I would say this barn is on the smaller side, so the entire main portion of this structure is dedicated to the horse stalls and some tack and accessories. Once again, though, I don't furnish that yet either. I just get the shell together and then I come back to it later on. At first, I wasn't sure in what order I wanted to do things in the speed build. I thought building the house and then fully furnishing it before moving on to the next area of the lot might seem like a lot. So to me, it made sense to build all the structures and then do general landscaping and then get into the furnishing portion later, so that once I get the flow going, I can just sort of keep it rolling and not have to stop with the start of the next build, if that makes sense. Now, when it came to the colors of the barn, I wanted it to pair nicely with the house, but let it look different enough to give the illusion that the barn and the goat barn / hobby barn that we will build here in a minute were both built a little while after the house. Maybe this family had inherited this home and it had been passed down through the generations, and so the different buildings were added here and there as the years went by or something like that. So I imagined that this barn would be pretty old as well, and that the family might have been more meticulous with preserving the appearance of the house over the barn and other buildings on the property. So I chose finishes that would help give that worn and rugged appearance that the main house and the gazebo wouldn't have. Here I am figuring out a nice layout for the posts, and then I adjust the roof line over the side section just to help tie it in a little more so it doesn't look so out of place. So after I fiddle around with that a little bit, I move on to placing doors and windows. It was a little tricky because the colors of these barn doors we got in the horse ranch pack don't really match each other, but luckily I could get them both in this soft shade of blue that I was looking for, and then I found a way to make it work by adding these open windows that came with the cats and dogs pack. It was just something about those pops of white on either side of that solid blue that did help blend the space together a little better. The rest of the windows I used were from both the Horse Ranch and Jungle Adventure game pack. I was arranging windows here and there, and I could not help but notice that once I put these windows in the dormers, they end up looking like eyes because of where the barn door was. And it was one of those once you see it, you can't unsee it things. And so I tried my best to choose windows that would make that creepy face less obvious, but I'm not going to lie, I definitely still see a face there. And I couldn't bring myself to change the roof line because I liked it so much. So I just came to terms with the fact that on our farm, we are just going to have ourselves a creeper barn. So to finish up, I placed some blue aged looking siding on the top half of the creeper barn with a beat up wooden paneling around the lower portion. Off to the left side, I didn't mention this before, but I did make a grain silo that I cover with a cedar looking shingle pattern, but that changes later on to a more metal looking texture that goes more nicely with the look of the farm as a whole. Up close it worked fine, I thought, but then when you would zoom out, that silo stuck out like a sore thumb. Also, at some point here soon, I do change the orientation of the barn. For some reason, I thought it would make sense to have it facing sideways like this so that the horses could exit out the back of the barn into the side field area where they will sometimes go to hang out. But once it was fully built, for some reason, I didn't like it in that spot. So I do turn it, like I said, at some point so that the back door butts up against the back of the lot, which is fine too. I feel like they can still go out through there and run off to wherever. Inside here, I do some worn looking light blue paneling, and I use the cracked stone ruins and broken stones that came with the Jungle Adventure pack. And if you use those together, you can manipulate how worn the floor looks in specific spots. So I lay down the cracked stone ruins flooring where I want the stone floor, and then I just add the broken stones in the area where I think it would naturally be more worn, like in front of the door or other high trafficked areas. It's a really easy way to customize your builds, and I think it's fun to always have like little hints of realism and stuff like that in your builds. This is also a good trick to use with the carpet as well. Just place down the regular carpet, and then in the higher trafficked areas, place that more grody stained carpet so that the area looks older or more lived in. Now we are starting on our final structures, I promise, which are our goat barn and adjoining hobby shed. We could call it maybe a she shed. In it, I just put a bunch of crafting activities and a gaming table, so it ends up being a cool little place to hang out. And I could have just done two little separate buildings, but I thought it would be more interesting to separate them with a cool little breezeway. And so I did sort of a lattice pergola-esque type of thing up above, and then I'll go back a little bit later and throw some plants up there. It makes it, just a little bit more interesting than just two standalone buildings near one another. So when I design the goat slash sheep space, I give them everything they will need so that you can lock them up if you want. I feel like at first some of us probably felt a little bad for fencing them in, but once you play with goats or sheep for more than like 15 minutes, you understand the desire to lock them up. I swear, at the same time, we were all just like, yup, they're cute, but they're everywhere. Let's put them in sheep jail. Those little stinkers are everywhere. But hey, I don't want to speak for you guys because you might still be free range goat parents. I don't know. Leave a comment below if you still let your goats run wild and free. But I think a lot of us have resorted to locking them up. Okay, as far as the design of this she shed slash goat slash sheep barn goes, we are using all of the same windows, floors, and wall patterns as the creeper barn. Here inside the goat shed, I placed one of those Hey Now horse beds, which I know are specifically made for horses, but I swear the goats and sheep do go sleep on those things. I mean, it could be just a coincidence that they happen to lay down right where that item is placed, but I figure, what if it's not? Either way, it just looks more comfortable for them than not having anything to lay on, so I put one in. Though, in the rug section of the catalog, we did get a hay rug that I am only just now remembering as I'm doing this voiceover. So, before I place this on the gallery, I think I'm going to go back around and place that everywhere it would make sense. So, if you upload this and there's random hay everywhere, you've been warned. I'm going to use that everywhere that I feel like there would be hay scattered. So, yeah, I'm going to do that off camera here as soon as I finish recording this video. I also remembered just now that I didn't place a bunny stump either, so I will be tossing in a few of those as well. Okay, now that all of our buildings are finally completed, I am just rearranging them all a tiny bit before we start on separating all the different animal areas. We've got a huge area for the horses to hang out and graze on some prairie grass over near the barn. And then I made a separate section for the racing barrels and horse jumps. And I know that we have those off to the right side of this lot, but it's always nice to have them on your actual lot, so when they are done, the horses and Sims will just resume their normal autonomous behavior, because for some reason it seems like if they're off lot using those items, your Sims will dismount their horse and run home, and then your horse just stands there. Maybe that was just my experience with those, or I mean, maybe since then it's been fixed, but for me, I think having those close by the house is always nice, and at the very least, it's always fun to just be able to like peek on them using those items while your other Sims are doing things around the farm. And I placed these animal sheds at the top left-hand corner of this lot. I used their area to help the horse area seem more separated, but I tried to use the fencing in a way that would make it seem like there was a through section of gates, if that makes sense. So that your Sims still have a path to the cow area, but then your horses could still easily get through as well. I just thought that would help things look more interesting. Near the goat area, I put in a section for some chickens as well, so that you can fence them in if you wanted to. And I should note that on this lot, I didn't place any large gardening areas, but you could always designate one of the two horse areas to a large garden if you wanted to. I mean, you do have that option with the horse jumps and barrels already being so close by, if you don't mind having to go over into the field to use those. And I don't put in a nectar maker either, because the hobby barn's sort of a multi-purpose space. I mean, you can really use that to make it into whatever you want. So I figured if you want them to make nectar, you could do that in there. You could place a basement underneath that area too, so that your nectar ages more quickly. It could be an in-law suite for your elderly parents. Instead of having them live alone, they could come help you take care of your animals, so it would give them something to do, and it would also help you out. Placing a bathroom and some bedroom furniture in there could actually make that a nice spot for anyone. So you could have your teenager stay out there, or I thought it could be the perfect space for a butler or a live-in ranch hand. It could be a nice home office space too for any home business that you would want your Sims to run. Like, how cute would it be to have that space be like a little vet clinic or something? You could divide that fenced in area between those buildings, and you could have one barn just for sheep and the other barn for goats. Or if you didn't want animals in that space at all, you could always put a pool in that fenced in area to make it into like an epic pool house or guest house. What else? Oh, you could change up the windows to the ones from the greenhouse pack, and then you could make that your gardening space so that you could grow crops all year round in a greenhouse. If you guys have any other ideas, definitely leave them in the comments below. I love seeing what you guys have in mind. It's fun how quickly someone might think of something that you yourself probably never would have even thought of. But yeah, so this gazebo area came together easily in a sense, but then it was very time consuming in a sense, because no matter how many plants I added, I always like kept going back and thinking that I needed to add more, and I really wanted to frame in like the walkway areas. And then I did end up putting in the mallard ducks here on this side where you can see, and then I did some lightning bugs or fireflies, whatever you call them, where you're from, over by the gazebo, and then under the big willow tree, that's where I put the swans. And so I think that whole area ended up being really pretty, and it pairs so nicely with the Victorian farmhouse aesthetic I was going for. The large majority of the plants I am using for this build are from the debug menu, and I do end up editing a large portion of the landscaping out just because it can seem so monotonous to watch back, even because I'm using a lot of the same plants across the entire lot. So just watching me place the same things over and over all around. I mean, maybe you wouldn't mind, but I think most people would probably be like, okay, I've seen enough. So I leave in enough so that you get the general idea. But then, yeah, like I said, I edit a good bit of that out. Also, when I'm doing big farms like this, or even parks, I do like to use that darker green, more lush looking terrain paint. And then I'll go back and highlight it a little bit with a brighter green grass. And then I'll add some of the brown mulchy looking paint under the plants just to make those areas pop. And so it can be a lot. And I know when I use this dark green terrain paint in this way, it can sometimes make the space feel like it doesn't match the surrounding areas. But I just like to pretend that maybe the Sims on this lot just planted some grass seed or something. I don't know. I really just like the way it looks on big lots like this. So this is my typical go-to style over that more like dusty ranch like farm aesthetic. Like other people can make that look so good, and I want to play in those lots so bad, but anytime I start to make a build, my go-to is always like super green, lots of flowery plants. So I don't know. Is that something that you would change up or not? I mean, do you have a preference between those two styles, or does it not make that much of a difference to you? I'm curious how you guys feel about it. Also, when it comes to the terrain paint in this game, it can be super glitchy anymore. I feel like it used to be that way in the past, and then I don't know if they fixed it, but my terrain paint stopped disappearing for the longest time, and then now lately, the last couple builds I've done, it's starting to erase on me again. So that's one of the cons of designing something in this way is if the game decides to delete it, it is a lot to go back and redo. And as I was building this lot, actually, it did that to me one time. So I think I had all of it done at the time when it decided to erase it on me. So I go back and I mean, I recreated it to where it looked exactly like this, but you'll notice the difference in the screenshots because it did it between the time I built this and the time that I went into my game to play test and then do some screenshots. So between that period is when I had to redo it. And I think it still looks the same. You'll have to let me know when you watch the screenshots back. But yeah, it was a lot to redo. But I like to think that maybe the second time you're doing it, not only do you have an idea of how it's going to go, but you can maybe make it better in the areas that, you know, maybe you thought it was lacking before. I don't know. I'm trying to find the silver lining in the game deleting my terrain paint. So here I am just going through and I'm connecting all the little pathways. I decided to do a driveway all around the house. I thought that looked cute. I was debating between doing a backyard and then just having the driveway separate in the front there and one go toward like the cowshed area and then the other one going toward the garage portion off the barn area. But I kind of liked how it connected toward the back, and this is such a big lot and there's so much to do here already that having an official backyard space didn't seem really necessary. Here in a minute you'll see me start the actual decor process. Finally, we're only like 20 some minutes into this build and I'm only just now starting the building. So if you're still hanging on with me, you're amazing. You're a trooper. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Like I said, I edited a lot of the monotonous stuff out. I mean, at least I tried to, so that this was all interesting to watch the entire time. But yeah, we will get to the decor portion here in just a minute, which I think is the most fun part of the video to talk about. Sometimes when you're just in the building portion, it's like, I don't know, what do you go on about? And I'm just not sure what speed build viewers prefer. Do you like when we talk through the speed build, or do you prefer to listen to music while you're watching a build? I know for me, it would be much easier if I could just, put on some music, but when it comes to what I like to watch personally, and you'll have to let me know in the comments what you think and how you feel about watching speed builds, but I'll sort of multitask when I'm watching them. Like, I'll put on a speed build with someone talking, and I almost treat it as if it's like a podcast, and I'll set it down nearby and I'll do my makeup, or I'll unload the dishwasher, and so I'm listening to what they're building, and then every once in a while I'll look over to see like the progress of the build, if that makes sense. So I'm not, sitting there staring with my phone in my hand, because if it's just playing music, which I also like to watch sometimes when I'm sitting down and I'm actually relaxing, I don't mind watching them with just music playing in the background, but I do tend to watch more of them that are talking about the builds as they are building them. Sometimes I have a lot more to say about a build than other times. Like, if I have a backstory, it makes it easier, but a lot of the time, and maybe this is because I'm so new at this, but I struggle to find things to talk about that are related to the build, or that would be interesting for you guys to hear me talk about. I used to make stop motion builds, and I mean, I still plan to make some in the future depending on the build, I suppose, but those are so insanely time consuming. And with those, thing I was talking about a second ago, that these speed builds, you can almost treat them like a podcast or something. And with the stop motion builds, they are a little too artistic to be talking over. So you have to tell your story in a little bit of a different way with those, or maybe you just aren't able to at all. Like, when I think of stop motioning, I think that they are the perfect way to really showcase your work to ultimate perfection. Like, if you are choosing to make a stop motion build, you are definitely type A, which is beautiful, but it's a lot. And don't get me wrong, I want to make sure I'm showcasing my builds to the best of my ability now that I'm doing speed builds, but I have a little bit of wiggle room now to have it be perfectly imperfect, Not to mention, doing things this way allows me to put a little bit more of myself into my videos, because that's a thing that I love about this community too, is all the different personalities. Whether it's a speed builder or somebody who does Let's Plays, I tend to really love the creators, and they are the reason that I go back. Like, yes, we all love a good build, but for me, a lot of the time, it's the people. So shout out to all those stop motioners for real. Like, I want to take a second to say, you are amazing. They are talented beyond belief. And I am so often in awe of their work, because especially since I've done them firsthand, I know how much work they are putting into each and every one of their videos. And I feel like they get such little recognition. Like, if you have any idea about how much goes into making one of those videos, I don't know, you don't watch them the same way ever again once you know how much of their heart and of their time they're putting into making those videos. I mean, really, a lot of us builders put so much time into making these videos, and for me, I just love having a community to share The Sims with. I never really had anybody in my life that played The Sims as well, so this is my way of having some friends around that share the love for Sims the same way that I do. So okay, I'm gonna get it together. I'm gonna get back to talking about the build. I did the gazebo and made the little garden area, and then now I'm sorry, I feel like that was a really abrupt jump into getting back into talking about this. I was getting a little bit sentimental about The Sims for a second there, but okay, we're gonna get it together and we're gonna get back inside. So in this entryway, I thought it was too small of a space to really add an actual fireplace, so I found this item that was actually in with the fireplaces. I don't know why I thought it was in the shelving part of the catalog, but if you're looking for this, It's like a faux fireplace. It's in with the fireplaces, but I kind of wanted to use that in that area instead of a real fireplace just to give the room a more historic feel, if that makes sense. So from the entryway off to the left, we are headed into the kitchen. I knew for sure that I either wanted to do a green or blue counter in this room rather than a natural wood tone, and I eventually ended up settling on this blue. I felt like it tied nicely with the rest of the farm, as blue seems to be a reoccurring theme on this lot. So I went with the new counters we got from the Horse Ranch pack. I did like a little mix and match with some of the cabinets that we got with the country kitchen kit. Is that right? Is that a kit that we got? Either that or it was the cottage living, but that shade of blue was similar enough that it all looked like it sort of fit together pretty well. And then I paired that all with the tile that resembles a classic subway tile, which I think helped it look a little bit more Victorian than country, though I mean I suppose it can be both because this is a Victorian farmhouse, but I guess my goal was just to not lose sight of the Victorian in the farmhouse. So I collect a bunch of clutter items that I think will work well with our theme, and then I honestly really like how everything came together. I love cluttering rooms like this. Kitchens and bathrooms should always be cluttered. Cluttered enough so that, you know, it looks lived in, but not so cluttered that it's unusable. I like to keep it a healthy balance. But yeah, and I love using tables in place of an island just to change things up a little bit, make it look a little bit more interesting. And I thought placing the older style refrigerator and stove in here helped keep the kitchen looking more vintage, like we want it to look like it's old, just well loved and properly maintained. I am sorry too if I'm talking fast. It's a bad habit, and I know that maybe it's overwhelming to your senses if stuff happening on screen is flying by at a really fast pace and then somebody's chirping in your ear very fast. So I need to like learn to calm down, and the video's not going anywhere. I can still explain while things are happening. So, oh yeah, in this part of the kitchen over here in the little cubby by the refrigerator, I thought it would be cute to put the little bread box in there, and then quickly remembered that I didn't have a microwave, so that ended up being the perfect spot. In here, I'm just doing a couple finishing touches on our little makeshift island area. I throw down a couple of these cute blue rugs. I think those came with the vampire pack. I didn't get that pack for the longest time just because I was more of a builder rather than a player. I like playing with vampires now that I do play a little bit, but I didn't think I would like any of the furniture pieces because I thought it would have more of a gothic feel to it, and I don't typically do those style of builds. But I have almost all of the packs except for Journey to Batu, and then it was the vampire pack. So when I ended up getting it, I was so mad at myself because this hardwood floor that I used in this house is from that pack as well, and I think it is my favorite by far hardwood floor in the entire game, and I end up using it a ton. I love how it is on a diagonal, so if you reverse the direction of it from room to room, it not only helps the rooms look more separated, but it matches up perfectly and then gives a really neat effect. Sometimes in the same room, I like to just do strips like in one direction and then in between those do it in the other direction, so it looks almost like a chevron pattern, if that makes sense. I hope that I'm making sense. But I think I've done that in a couple of my builds. So if you are familiar with my builds, you've probably seen me do that in some of my stuff that's on the gallery. Here in the dining room, I kept it fairly simple, and I thought it ended up looking really elegant, especially during certain times of the day. When the lighting comes in, it really ended up being a beautiful space. Now, here in the living room, I was a little bummed that the way the floor plan worked out. When I think of a Victorian house, I think of fireplaces. And so in my head, I imagined having a fireplace in every room. But the way the floor plan worked out, I wasn't able to put any fireplaces in without them being awkwardly positioned. So here I do manage to at least put in the new wood burning stove we got with the Horse Ranch pack. and I really love how well it turned out, actually. It looks like such a cozy space. Like, you could imagine yourself laying down and watching a Lifetime movie or reading a book or like having the best nap of your life on this couch. I threw in the little fire poker set and a little bundle of wood, which I thought helped it look really lived in. I tried on multiple occasions to use this little accent shelf that we got with the Growing Together pack. You'll see me try to place it. Here it is, yet again, in this room. And I had my heart set on using it, but I couldn't get it to fit anywhere. So I ended up putting a shelf in instead. So maybe in another build, I can use that shelf sometimes. It's just not meant to be, I think. And once I put the final touches in the living room, I think I put a little picture on the wall. I put a couple of rugs by both back doors, the one in the living room and then the other one in the dining room. And then I couldn't quite decide which curtains to use, but I ended up using these ones that we got with the movie hangout pack. And the shade of them was a little lighter than something I was looking for, but I think it ended up working once I get the wallpaper in. I think they ended up actually brightening up the space a little bit. So once I finish up these final touches in the living room space, I head off to the laundry room, and surprisingly, of all rooms in this entire house, the laundry room is the one that came together the easiest for me, and I love it so much. All of the different textures in here are what really make this space. Between the brick floor, the worn wooden cabinets, and the wicker on the hamper, and the texture of the rug, it just all makes this area feel so homey and lived in. And if you couldn't tell, that is always my go-to style and goal of every build, because I feel like having things like clutter around really help make your Sims home feel more realistic and add a sense of life to the space. And then from here, we move over to the connected half bath. And like I said earlier, if you aren't into doing the laundry thing, or if you don't have that pack in your game, this would make a really great bedroom space or home office space. In this room, I do like to use those end piece counters. In most laundry rooms or bathrooms, I like to use those. And then I make sure I put enough clutter on them so that your Sims won't come in here and cook on them. That drives me bananas when, rather than cooking in the kitchen, they will go off to some faraway counter to prepare their meal. Though I do totally get it if I was the one that messed up and didn't provide them with the proper space in the kitchen area, which does happen on occasion, but that's why I make sure to always playtest so that if something like that does end up happening in the game, once I get Sims in there, I can fix it up for you guys before I upload it to the gallery. This little half bath is simple, and though I initially planned to have the bathrooms in this house be more colorful, I honestly liked how classic this space ended up looking. So I do extend this look with the dark walls and the penny tiles upstairs to the other two bathrooms. This is the point where I realized that I forgot a trash can. If I had $1 for every time I said that in one of my videos, one of my speed building videos, which I only have 3 of those so far, I would have $3, I think, because I forget trash cans in every build, and I say it in every build, but here we are again saying it. I remembered the trash can though. So now we've headed upstairs to start on the landing, and usually this is a place that I would fill with more decorative items, but in this build, I ended up being able to use the space created by the turret for a little art nook, and all the items I typically use for art spaces tucked perfectly in there, and I think it just looks so cute. So I used this full-length mirror, and it helps bring the two areas together and make it feel a little bit more cohesive. And then I pop in a few pictures and some plants and a couple of those woven looking rugs that we got with the cats and dogs pack. And then the entry area is complete. And from there, we are moving into the main bedroom. In here, I used this really pretty bed that we got with the high school years pack, mostly because I like the bedspread on here, and it came with a lot of really nice swatches, but it matched really well with those end tables, the new ones we got with the horse ranch pack. And I think those together made this feel like an adult space. So even though I would typically use this bed in a teenager's room, it ended up working really well in this main bedroom. And the dresser is one that we got from the cats and dogs pack as well. And I don't get to use that one as much because a lot of the wood tones in there don't match with other wood tones that we get in our beds and nightstands. I don't end up getting to use that one as much as I would like. I think a lot of my all-time favorite furniture pieces came from the more country-inspired packs, like the Cats and Dogs pack. I love stuff that came with the Cottage Living pack, and then now this Horse Ranch pack. And I think a lot of it does end up pairing nicely together, which I always appreciate. This main bathroom ends up being really spacious, so much so that I was able to have a double vanity here, and then I ended up creating a separate space for the toilet as well, mostly because it's nice to have a little private toilet area. I mean, we like them in real life, so why not extend that into Sims land? But also just to give the illusion that this space is more closed in and cozy, so it didn't end up looking like super empty in here. As I was building, I was sort of just pulling items out of the catalog and placing them around. And apparently I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing, because on the wall behind where I placed the bathtub, and you will see me decorate this here in a second, but I had pulled a whole bunch of different items out and I was just sort of placing them around because I thought they would match. And once I finally noticed what I was doing, there are so many different items that I place right in this little area with towels. There's like the towel warming rack that I place, and then there's a basket with some like washcloths or hand towels, and then there is like a couple other little, I don't know what I was doing. And then I turn around and I place another little wicker hamper here with a whole standalone shelf with a bunch more towels on it. So I don't know what I was doing, but I found it humorous once I finally realized, and then I couldn't bring myself to change it because I just thought it was too funny. And see, it's things like this that I think are fun to be able to share with you guys too. This and then Creeper Barn we ended up with outside. So now, if you upload this build into your game, you can think of me when you're being creeped out by your barn, or when your sim is bathing near this wide arrangement of bath towels. So once we move into the second bedroom of this house, things get a lot more fun and colorful. I was designing the space to look like it was maybe put together with antique pieces that the mom might have found at a flea market or something, and it ended up looking really awesome with all of the different colors. And once I got started in here, it started feeling like it would be more for a tween sim. Like, it's not overly childish, but it isn't overly mature either. So you could take this and customize it in either direction based on who you plan to play in this build with. Like for a kiddo, you could place a toy box or a dollhouse in here. It already comes complete with one of those monster repelling nightlights. And then if you wanted to take it in a more teenage direction, you could delete the little llama stuffy and the kid's like pencil jar, and you could replace it with some makeup clutter that you could even put over by the mirror or something. And if it was a teen, that would be awesome because they would have their own bathroom over here. I tried to play into the fact that it could be a child sim, so when I go to place like the hand soap or the bath mats, I made them pink because I thought that would be fun to show that maybe the kid like was trying to put their own little touches in the bathroom or something. So I thought that was fun. And then finally, the last room we are finishing up in the house is this office space, and I really, really love how this space turned out. I started out with this green desk that I think came with the paranormal pack, if I'm not mistaken. And so I sort of based the whole room around that desk, and I love how it came together. I end up placing the chair that looks like it's draped in a cloth that we got from the new Horse Ranch pack, and the swatch that I used, I didn't even realize was like a thing on here, and I love how it looked in this space. Like, this is one of my favorite areas of the whole house. It looks so fun, which brings us to working on the outside areas of this house. I did a little bit of editing magic just there, and in an instant placed the rest of the plants and finished up the terrain paint so that we could get right into decorating this garage space. I quickly placed a fizzy maker hickey. I'm not sure what that item is called. And then I put a radio over there, and then some other garage clutter, and then I pop a woodworking table out around back as well. And then the interior of this barn I loved so much. It came out super, super cool. I saved this little section of the back corner for the horse tack and some other horse supplies that you would need to care for the horses. And then I put 3 horse beds in total in this build, 1 in its own stall and then 2 in a larger stall, maybe like a mom and a baby horse, or 2 horses that would get along could stay in the same stall. I place a little water trough, and then I pop back in to put a few ribbons up on the stall to make it look like we raise champions on this farm, because I thought that was a super cute idea. I did that in one of my personal builds, and I just loved how it looked when you would go in there. Like, it just makes it look more decorated. And then when the kids would make paintings, I'd put up there too, almost like they made a painting for the horse. Just little cute ideas that are super random that I'm just going to tell you about. So I place a horse feeder outside and then some horse balls in this side yard. I feel like this is the yard where they would graze and do more of the playing. And then this other one where I place the training barrels and the jumps would be like the field where they would do a lot of their work. I did design the space specifically to look like right here there were open gates to match up with the open gates from the side yard, where I don't know if you play on this lot a lot, but your horses will spend so much time over there. Like, no matter what you put in your own space, it's like they want to be over there. So I made this incorporate like a little area where it looked like, you know, you would open the gates and allow them to go over into that space, so it looked more natural for them to be over there. Here is a little chicken coop area with a gate so we can lock our chickens up. And I like to place garbage cans in those spaces as well, just so when you're cleaning your chicken coop, you're not running like the whole way across a lot to throw that away. So I put one over by the cows, and then I put one by the chickens. Here in the goat barn, I thought it was a really cute touch, but I place a yoga mat in here because I thought it would be fun, almost like your Sims are doing baby goat yoga. And then I finish up in the hobby barn, and I just want to say I am really, really glad that you are still here hanging out with me by the end of this video. I hope that you like this build, and I do plan to do many more, as my goal is to put out at least a new video a week. And you can download all of the builds you see here on my channel on the gallery. My ID is RobertaPancakes. Once again, thank you so, so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you all again next time. Bye, everybody.